Yeah. But in terms of now that you have left Siddiq, right? It's been rebranded to become MITRA.
Yeah.
Right, and it did go through a tough time in terms of allegations and people condemning them, saying that they may not have been doing as much as they can for the Indian community, and now it's been headed by YB Prabhakaran. So, you were part of SEDIC, you were part of the Prime Minister's department. What would you advise him on what he should do first in order to rebrand MITRA as actually an entity that an agency that actually does good for the people?
I think visibility, that's number one.
Okay.
So you have to be seen more by the people that you're serving. You've got to be aware that people are watching and they want answers. So unless and until you engage enough people, so the kind of approach that we currently take is very, I would say to a certain extent, it's still very conventional, even when you talk about social media. Now, the question is how many, of course, you've started to see more of these conversations now take place in podcasts. They are starting to think outside the box with, the way they communicate to the public, which is good. But you've got to understand that people want to see you. So if right now, Prabha has to really step up his game, and primarily visibility is important. So he has to be seen at areas of genuine concern.
Yeah.
So if you talk about the education system, he has to be present there, providing some kind of feedback that MITRA has obtained. I give you a simple, for example, I've actually come up with some numbers today. All right. So one very simple thing that, probably an organization like MITRA can adopt is a study on different segments of the society and looking into actual needs that they are currently facing. So, for example, here, the most basic thing is to divide the community firstly by their age group and by their gender. Because by understanding that primarily, you'll then look at the concerns a bit more deeper. Number two would be looking at job sectors.
Definitely.
So are you in professional services, manufacturing, agriculture, retail, healthcare, legal services, or even for a fact of people being in the civil service itself. So looking at those numbers, then you understand, again, a different dimension of the issue, right? A simple statistical exercise that I did, for this particular discussion that we had, that we were going to have. I looked at 2 different years between 2020 as a baseline, a more recent baseline, and 2023. So this is basically data within 3 years or 4 years right now that has been taken. And if you look at the numbers, when people say that, okay, we don't have enough seats in institutions of higher learning, just for reference, we note here, okay, we have roughly about, in primary school alone, we have roughly about 25% of the population who are in primary school. Okay. And then if you're talking about secondary school, again, it's roughly about 23 to about 25%. We're talking about students who are right now in their foundation level or doing their pre-U undergraduate studies, whether it's your A-levels or whatever. We have at least about 5% there, okay, of the community. I'm not talking about a specific age group right now, but of course I have the numbers by age group here. Now,
when you say 5%, you mean 5% of the Indian community or 5%?
Yeah, 5% of the Indian community. So the Indian community number for 2020 was about 6.6% out of the total population. And at that point of time, the total population was about 33.2 million. We had about 2.25 to about 2.3 million people in Malaysia. If you look at the numbers today, in 2023, it was about the same. Now, the only difference is, if you look at the pie for Malaysia, the numbers have increased from 33.2 million to about 34 million in the past 3 years. Okay, which is about 1 point something million people.
Yeah.
And we are still maintaining that same portion of the whole community pie, I would say. Now, I don't think when you talk about any kind of changes in numbers, the community itself is affected, because if you look at the numbers in 2023, we had, again, the number of students who were in primary school was roughly about 21 to 22%, which was an increase about roughly 1%. And then you had roughly about the same percentage of increase, it's about 1 to 2% in secondary school goers. For students who were enrolled in public university, we had roughly about, in 2020, we had about, let me just see here, we had about close to 15% who were in public university, 15% of the population,
Okay.
which is still a lot, okay? Now, 15%, and when you look at the discussion that was there about the quota system, they were still fighting for like 10%.
About 15% already.
But 15% were already, 15% were already enrolled in public institutions.
Okay.
You know, and when you talk about public institutions, of course, they are students who go in because they get a placement. And of course, when you go in, you still pay a certain fee. Okay. Now that is one way of going in. The second way is you get a scholarship to get in. So there are students from both sets of whatever segments that I just told you in the public university premise itself. Meaning if you're looking at students going into the public university, that premise has got two inputs lah. Okay. So again, we're still arguing about
Quota system and all.
something superficial, and we've actually passed that barrier.
Okay.
You know, and like what your commentator said about 18% that are graduating. Yes, we have 18% in totality. Roughly, that is an estimate. It could be more, but 18% is an average because you have public university students who are graduating, and you have private university students who are graduating as well. So just to give you an idea, public university students, like if you look at the segment again, it's roughly about 5 to 10% of the community segment that is in the private university segment, which if you look at it in retrospect, that essentially is your T20 Indians lah. You know, that is a simple assumption. If you want to be simplistic, that is an assumption you can make. But again, you got to look at how many students are going in because of scholarships. You got to see how many of them are getting, financial support, and the ones that are actually paying. You will see that the ones that are actually paying is a bit more smaller because of course these are the T20 groups lah. Okay, especially if we're talking about like UK, Malaysian, UK universities that are in Malaysia. If you're talking about private universities that are in Malaysia, if you're paying, it doesn't cost you small money. So again, we've got to look at numbers. And one example that I just gave you proves why I say that, many of the kinds of issues that we still bring out till date, especially issues around race relations. I mean, let's be real lah. You're telling me there are no racist Indians?
No, I will do one better. I think everybody is a racist to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Everybody. I've said some racist shit behind closed doors. I'll be honest.
I mean, we all are to a certain extent. I mean, whether you like it or not. I mean, let's not be hypocrites lah.
Yeah.